Hello, Bully Sting viewers. I am your host, as always, Carolyn Strong, and we are here in sunny Florida. Nothing like the snowy Chicago that we just left. And our business here is twofold today. We were here to present at the National Bullying Conference, and we had the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Bobbie Bean today. He is the author of Shattered Dreams, Broken Patriot, and we are going to interview him about his book, talk to him about his experience with his family and his son and how bullying has impacted his life, and we're going to have a courageous conversation today. Hi, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you for the interview. Anything to spread the word to start stomping out the bullying best we can. And we got our work cut out, as we all know.
Yes, we do. Let's talk about Matthew. I want to start from the beginning because I've read your book, so I know your story. But I want my audience to hear your story from you.
Okay.
So talk to me about Matthew.
All right, people, I'm going to go ahead and tell you how it all went down in the first 7 to 8 days. Okay, because it altered my family forever, the bullying incident, and we will never be the same. Okay. At the end, as you read the book, the family fell apart. It's very common in these situations, but I did not know that at the time. But let me take it from the top. One day, we're sitting at the house, and like a lot of parents, we get the kids ready, and we took them down to the bus stop, and I almost, within seconds, almost didn't make the bus. And you'll see why later that bothers you.
Yeah.
Well, about an hour into school, the phone rings, and Carol picks up the phone, and the school said Matthew got hurt in the locker room.
This is an hour after you put him on the bus?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
This is an hour after I put him on the bus. And they said Matthew was horsing around in the locker room and he got hurt. And I didn't think much of it. They said that Matthew's an overachiever, and we said, he's an overachiever. He's not going to skip out on school for any excuse. About 10 minutes later, the phone rings again. I said, Matthew don't look so good. So I look at Carol and I said, I'm running the printing press. We had a home business. And I said, I'll go ahead and watch Hunter in the crib, and I'm running the press. You go down and see what's going on with Matthew. She grabs the number 3 boy and takes off. We have 4 boys.
Okay.
The next thing I hear, at that time, Carol comes back up. It takes a little while.
She went to the school and
Yeah,
came back.
she went to the school. She picks him up. He was in a fetus position, she told me, and all he kept saying was these words: I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home. Won't get off the bus. Then 2 teachers actually carried him to the car and put him inside the car. Now, not knowing this, just to throw this out there, that once they put him in your car, he's your responsibility. Exactly. So that's, of course, I don't know this at the time. And then keep in mind, I don't know anything yet. So Carol pulls up and drives past the hospital, drives him home, takes about 20 minutes. As they pull up on this hill coming up to our house, we've got a big plate glass window. I'm looking out the window sipping some coffee, and all I could see was Matthew's eyes rolled in the back of his head, and I could see him vomiting. He wasn't conscious. I run out, I ripped the car open. He wasn't in this world. I try to get a response by rolling my knuckles in his chest, because I've been around situations. Mm-hmm. No response. And he's losing consciousness further.
Going in and out.
Yeah, so I snatched Carol out of the car, the number 3 boy, off to the hospital. We haul to the hospital. As I get to the hospital, I pick Matthew up, and then he just collapses. I pick him up in my arms, and I'm actually running into the hospital. And before I got to the first doors that open up automatically, he melted in my arms like overcooked macaroni. It's probably when he had his first stroke. The next door as I kick in, the nurse came over and she says to me, runs up with a pin source light, puts it in his eyes, and she says, he's been like this for hours. What took you so long? I don't know anything. I just look at her. This is as much as I know, and I'm here.
So she said he's been like this for hours because it takes hours to get that way?
Yes, a percussion like he had.
Okay.
It takes time for it. What he did, he started barely hemorrhaging in his brain, and it was swelling.
Okay.
He was losing his motor skills. Had no sight, couldn't talk, slurred speech. But when I came in and she put the light on him, then she said, go to bed A. So it's right there. They pulled it back. He started losing more consciousness. So what they said is, at first we didn't know if he was on drugs or not. And I said, I don't know. You know, as a parent, I like to think not. So
Right.
they had to start running tests. They came back, there was no drugs in his systems. I was trying to keep him conscious. They kept saying keep him conscious. Well, during this time, he's fading in and out, and they're putting things on him, EKGs, and giving him shots. And I'm holding him in my arms, and he just drops on the, just totally collapses again, melts in my arms. So I'm holding him in my arms, what gave me a lot of drive later on for 22 minutes. And I actually said to myself in my head, when I'm contemplating is he going to live or die, and I got to go home and tell Carol.
Right.
Because I don't know anything. And I was trying to handle the situation pretty good. But the nurse did say to me that when I told him it happened at Sebring Middle School, she said, another one?
And you know, that was something that I actually highlighted to ask you about. When she said another one, did you ever find out through grapevine or word of mouth exactly what she meant by that? Because it was clear that this is not the first incident of injurious harm coming to a student from Sebring Middle School.
Oh no, Sebring has a long, long history of racial problems, okay, in our area.
Okay.
It's a rural area and they're pretty well stuck in the old ways. So I did find out the reason they carried out to the car, Matthew, was the wheelchair was already being used somewhere.
Wow.
I never could find out. I was in deep trouble, getting in deeper at that time. There was a time when the officer came and we did find out it was a boy named Clem. And when I did say Clem to the resource officer, she rolled her eyes up in her eyes, like people roll their eyes, and she says, I'm not surprised. Now I still don't know anything. I'm very worried about Matthew still.
Right.
So at this time the doctor comes up and says, we found a little spot on his brain which barely bleeding, and we really don't have a head trauma unit here at the hospital, up-to-date one. So they said we're going to fly him out to Tampa General, Davis Island. So they loaded him up and they flew him out. At that time I ran home and I had to tell Carol how deep we're behind the 8 ball. And we're getting deeper. And she really didn't know what was going on yet. So she took the number 2 boy, Greg, and I stayed home with the 2 babies. And she took off to Tampa. It's about a 2.5 hour drive.
Okay.
She gets there, at that time she gets there, it took her about 3 hours or so, she hadn't been there. They did put Matthew on life support for a few hours. When she got there, he started stabilizing at least.
Okay.
We knew that we weren't going to lose him, but we didn't know what we're up against yet.
Right, what you were going to come back, what he was coming back to, or as.
And this is when it gets deeper. They bring him back. At that time, we never even knew what post-traumatic stress disorder was. Okay? I didn't. Had no education in the field. Well, he sees a yellow bus coming in the Sebring. That's probably when he had his first post-traumatic stress disorder attack.
Now this is after he's home?
No, as we were coming back from the hospital a few days later.
Okay, so he was in the hospital for how long?
About 3 days.
Okay.
Then they, when they did release him, his vision, he lost a lot of his vision. But they said it would return in time. The blows he took was actually ended up being a death blow to the back of the neck and into the temple region. They estimated he was hit in the head maybe as many as 30 to 40 times.
Now, this 30 to 40 times, if I remember correctly, occurred over a 2-hour period in 3 separate incidents.
That's correct. He was beat on the bus. He was beat in the locker room. Then the deposition showed us the assailant walked him 90 yards, almost the distance of a football field, the long way to the clinic, we found out. He took him around the back way, beating him all the way. He beat him to Matthew went numb. I remember when Matt told me that. Then what got bizarre on it, you got to keep in mind, people, nobody told me about any fight on the bus or the walk to the clinic. All I knew was about the incident in the locker room. I'm 3-4 days into this, and I don't know anything yet, like what I'm about to find out.
So the school did not inform you. No one on the bus informed you. The bus driver didn't inform the school. It the only incident you knew about was the locker room incident.
Yes, ma'am, at that time. And this is how it catches up with him. So Matthew had the post-traumatic stress attack in the car. Just sweats, basically went apey really panicky and uptight. We get him home, the doctor gives him some medicine for him, and we're like 72, almost 4 days into this. We're all shot out, nerves-wise.
Right.
We're just shot out. Well, that night we gave Matthew his medicine, so it basically knocked him out where he could sleep. And I'm sitting at the kitchen table just like I'm sitting with you, and I'm talking to Carol, and I said, that boy hit him awful darn hard in the locker room. Then Greg speaks up, who's a 6th grader who was on the bus, my other son.
This is your younger?
My number 2 son.
Okay.
My number 2 son tells me that, Dad, it didn't start in the locker room, it started on the bus. And I looked at him, so I called him over, and we got the lowdown from Greg, what's going on here. Well, it's too late to do anything, too late at night. So next morning, I'm at the sheriff's department, first thing. I'm at the school, I'm at the state attorney, and Sheriff Susan Ben, who was lieutenant at the time, in charge of the resource officers, told me they were going to get to the bottom of this, and I was an upset parent, so I wanted to push another battery charge on the boy.
Right, because he already had the one for the locker room.
Yes, he had
but he didn't have one for the bus or the walk from the locker room to the clinic.
That's correct. At that time, there was no charges on that. Then we come back home, and I was really just run around the state attorney's office, the sheriff's organization, and the education. Nobody could give me an answer in transportation. I was getting stonewalled. So I come back home, and the weekend's coming up, and we're on the 8th day, I walked down the hallway, and something was wrong with Matthew, okay? He was just falling apart. I didn't know what it was, but there was something more than just a beating. So I was walking by the hallway, and Carol had Matthew in the corner of his bedroom, and he was just shaking like a leaf. And it scared him. So Carol says, Clem walked into the clinic quietly. And I said, what? She said, go around back. So we always talk around back, not in front of the children. And then she told me Clem walked into the clinic beating him. Nobody's yet told me anything. We're over a week into this. So I get on the phone Monday, and I'm back down at the sheriff's department. Nobody wants to meet with me now. Stu Gumphrey was in charge of the school, did tell me on the phone that he found out about the time I found out.
Okay, now these are the people, just so that I'm clear, these are the people that are over the lady at the hospital that basically said it doesn't surprise me that Clem did this.
Yeah, so these are assistant principals and staff. The only names in the books were changed people were my children and the wife. Okay, I did that for their own privacy, but everybody else is authentic in that book.
Okay.
I didn't hold back on nobody. Now, we didn't have anything. Nobody ever came out to help us. They just turned us off, and I kept wanting to find answers why Matthew's in this mental state, and it got deeper and worse. One time I had to take Matthew all the way up to Shands Hospital up in Gainesville,
Now, about how far is that for our listeners that aren't from Florida?
That would be a 5-hour drive. We did suicide watch for 5 years, day and night.
Okay.
Me and Carol. It took its toll on the family. Let me go back and say this, because there's so much I didn't put in the book because it's so long. But Matthew came out to me after Carol told me, and he was crying, he was upset. What did I do wrong? And I told Matthew, you didn't do nothing wrong. I gave my word I was going to get to the bottom. But at that point, now knowing 11 years later, my family was going to fall apart. There was nothing I could have done about it. We were melting down. I had no training in this. Nobody was coming out to help us. There was an election going on from the sheriff's department, and I've always believed, if you read my whole book, that if Susan Benton, this would have got out, she would have never been elected.
No, she wouldn't have. I read your whole book, and I came to the same conclusion that strategically, this incident could have ruined the careers of a lot of very influential and important people had it gotten out.
Yes, ma'am. And me not, I'm just being stubborn. I want to find an answer. And I'm worried about my number 3 and 4 son, because they're going to start school.
In that same school.
Yeah, in the same school. And I want an answer how this all fell apart. And all I would ever get an answer is things are off a little bit. We can retweak everything and make, and I'm still having problems with Matthew. Anybody who deals with post-traumatic stress disorder would understand more.
Right.
And when you get involved in a mental illness, it's horrible. And those are not the right words to use, how bad it was.
I can only imagine. And again, I've read your book, and if this is just a snapshot of the things that your family went through, the fact that you're here is a testament to your strength, because I was reading the book, and several times I had to put it down. I had to put it down and just kind of decompress for a minute and come back to it. And I have so many questions, because one of the main things is that I don't hear you saying at all is where the school was in this. I am a school official, and if a student gets hurt in my building, I'm going to the hospital.
Well, you're right. I wish you were where with my son, okay? Because they didn't do so good in the South, okay? I did find out there was the excuse one teacher gave us was he was somewhere in the locker room, but he can't remember. There was 3 teachers that were supposed to be in the locker room but weren't on duty. I found that out. But we were so tied up in Matthew's situation and his needs. We ran him to every hospital I could afford or find to help us through. And like I said, when I took him up to Shands, I told the professor my problem. And when she was typing, it was kind of interesting to watch her type. And she's taking it on the deal on the bus. And she took the deal in on the locker room. And when I told him about the 90-yard walk he took, she stopped typing. She shut her case and she says, Mr. Bean, you got a very big problem. Enormous. And that's when I started taking in how big my problem was. And I wasn't going to get out of it no time soon. 11 years later, still not out of it. And, feel free to ask a question there to guide me some, because I could.
I have so many, and I'm trying to, because I've read the book. I could flip through all day. But what I'm trying to figure out now is it's been 11 years, and at this point, the main question that I have, I know I saw towards the end that a 15-year-old Clint did say, okay, maybe I hit him a little too hard, but that's the only sense that I got, and that's not even a real apology as far as I'm concerned.
Oh no, there was no. He has no regard for life. Even the day he's got in trouble for violence and.
Well, of course he did. All the research shows that children that bully become adults who commit violent crimes.
Oh yes. Well, we found what I found, that bullies go 2 ways. We find them to go into the prison. We find a lot going to law enforcement. I mean, I had to bump heads with the biggest guns in Florida. FDLE, which is the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the Sheriff's Organization, and even the Federal Order of Police to try to get myself an answer.
That was the other question I had for you, is that it seemed as if every door that you tried to enter to get justice for your family was slammed in your face, and that the city that you're in, that their powers that be are so nepotismed up, if that's a word, and the system itself is so incestuous in the sense that everybody's related to everyone else, that it was hard for you to seek justice. Now my question is, it's always easier to look back. Looking back, do you think that maybe if you had pursued some sort of federal intervention, maybe you would have gotten quicker results?
You know, at that time, I'm just a father playing soccer and fishing. You know, I didn't have the education or the know-how what I was about to take on. I didn't realize how big the beast of the government was. You know, I'm not realizing I'm about to buck the system, and the taxpayers are paying that system to buck me back. And I didn't know what I was going to get into.
I mean, because we're talking about the person that beat your son within an inch of his life being charged with a misdemeanor and a 5-day suspension, and you facing a year in jail for letting a cow out of a barn or out of a gate. I mean,
well, go back a little further. That I know it's in the book. Is about 14 days out, when Matthew was out, I get a letter from Hollinger, the deputy superintendent, and here I am. I'm only 14 days away from the incident what happened to this boy, and we're all still falling apart.
Right.
And they tell me that they're going to throw me and Carolyn in jail for truancy if I don't return Matthew. Now, I got doctors telling me that if Matthew takes another blow to the head,
yes,
he's just going to be maybe putty sitting in the corner with drool hanging out of his mouth.
And that was when you guys made the decision to move him to the private school, right?
Yeah, well, actually what we did, at that time we just pulled him out. Okay.
And homeschooled him, and then he went to the Christian school.
Yeah, he went over to a Baptist school, Christian, Grace Academy, who helped us quite a bit through his difficult times. And we were able to, since Matthew was damaged, we were able to qualify for the McKay Scholarship.
Okay.
What helped a lot of children that have disabilities. Matthew had to wear corrective glasses for 36 months. And as I said in the book, that to give you an idea how fluent Matthew was a reader, he read the Harry Potter's book in 3 days. After the incident, he was stumbling over 10 words. So we had to retrain them all how to write, how to read and write. And nobody came there to help us. Okay, no school officials coming, nobody at the children's advocacy centers. We did find out that Sheriff Benton was in charge of the reports from the Sheriff's Department to give to the advocacy center for the children for them to come out and see us. And those were some of the reports that were squashed, because I know that you say that some other reports came up missing too, until you finally got some heavy hitter intervention, and then miraculously the reports came back up. They come back up, but I'm going to tell you that they get altered, and it's just not in Sebring, it's all through the United States at schools on incidences. When lawyers start thinking, ma'am, they knew that they were in trouble. I didn't look at it this way. I thought I was going to have this open gate of help to get this boy back to where he was. And you send your child to any public school at your own. Once a child walks in the gate, all his civil rights he does not have. And I know that to be true. Once a child goes in the gate or gets on the bus, all civil rights are gone. What a teacher can do or a staff member to a child, you could not do at your house to that child. And they can do it and get away with it. Now, can you elaborate on that? I've seen reports from other mothers and fathers where children were restrained, got black and blues on their arms from being tied down to the restraint seats, bruises around their necks.
Restraint seats in public school?
Yeah, it's seclusion and restraints. You know, when a child has a behavioral problem.
Oh, the BD room. Okay.
Okay, and they'll tie them down, and children do get hurt. And we had children would actually, one child was in one of those rooms and he hung himself on the doorknob. Remember how they used the weak blankets for children with
autism?
And one child was rolled up in the weak blanket without his head sticking out, and he smothered to death.
And this was all at the same school?
No, this
okay.
No, this wasn't at the same school, but it does. The restraints go on.
Okay.
I checked into it, but there was a point I had to back away from some of this because it'd tear you up.
Yes, just reading it's a little hard for me, so I can only imagine what it is to you. And it seemed like towards the end you were starting to get some answers. Now the question that I really want to ask is, because you still live in the city, correct?
I do, and only one of my other children do. He lives on the other end. He does not use his name, his real name, and we see each other a couple times a week, but we never let anybody know we're related. I don't want no retaliation. He's a good boy, and he's got a good wife and a good family. So we just leave it at that. I would leave if I had the finances.
Okay, you just answered my next question. That was going to be, because I can't imagine that it's easy for you to stay there. I can't imagine that it's easy for you to drive past the school where the beginning of what you describe as the end of your family started. I can't imagine.
No, it helped to go to therapy some, learn how to handle things. Okay, Bobbie, that was one thing I overlooked, and I'd like to tell anybody, whoever gets to listen to your show, it wasn't just Matthew needed the counseling, the whole family needed it, and I didn't see it. Okay. I'm not thinking of myself, you know. Matthew got post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
I got it when I was holding him in my arms, and you know, you're praying to God and your child's going to live.
Right.
And you'll pray, you know, big time. And I should have got some help. Every child in the house should have got it, and the wife.
So in the beginning, it was just him that got the therapy. There was never any family counseling or anything?
No, there was never no family counseling. And we paid all that therapy out of my own pocket. We didn't have insurance at the time.
Okay.
I didn't expect to get, you know, I expected a broken finger or a broken arm because he was going to play sports.
Right.
But I never thought what was going to happen.
And I know I read too that there was a settlement, but it didn't even cover the medical costs because you guys were just ready to be done.
Yes, we were physically, emotionally at our threads. We're done. We're toast. Matthew got the money awarded to him. I never took a penny. You couldn't even buy a car with it, basically. It was so low. They dragged it out for 7 years. They deliberately dragged it. And it's a tactic what your schools use to beat you down. They know what they're doing. You don't know that as a parent.
Right.
We could have hung in there longer, but it was a point, it was too disturbing to the family, and the nucleus of the family was already melted. And I couldn't, had to say quits. Yeah. And threw in the towel.
And I know too, when you were saying that they delayed, I do remember reading something about them holding up a settlement for a printing press too, that had nothing to do with this, but essentially because it was you.
Yeah, well, this, you know, and it's when you read the book, it'll fall into place. To make it quick, is Glaze Electric president is Jack Cox. The nepotism, as we talk.
Right.
Code enforcement also came out. Let me finish the transformer. Apparently, there was a transformer installed incorrectly. 19 homes got affected. Mine was one of them. They instantly paid for everybody's new air conditions and their losses within 2 weeks. They got to mine, and I had to go to court with these people for about $50,000 worth of printing equipment damaged. And they made me go through each hoop. And at this time, I didn't realize Susan Benton's dad is the president.
Well, I just want to stop you right there and interject, because at that point, that piece is so important because that was what you did.
Oh.
That was your livelihood. You were a printer.
No, losing the equipment, I instantly lost half my customers. I did a typing engraving, which is kind of rare in the printing business, and I had to have the equipment. And if they would have did what they promised in the first 14 days, it would have made a big difference. It put a big financial burden on this family of mine, and it was another breaking of our backs. 4 years later, I got the exact amount of money I asked for. Gary Lowry, who's code enforcement, who's in the book, did one day underneath his breast say how vindictive Susan Benton is and her staff. And by me speaking out for an answer, I get blackballed.
Right.
And we actually had code enforcement, Gary Lowry, who's code enforcement, who's Susan Benton's granddaughters and sons for the last 45 years or so, I believe the book will tell you. They served me a paper that I could not run my print shop out of my garage, what I was doing for 7 years prior and paying all my taxes. I did show it to a couple of senators in Florida, and they did get a little irate. And they did take it to Charlie Crist.
But isn't he related too?
No, not yet. I hope not. Charlie Crist wouldn't do anything. I showed him the documented lies of the Attorney General's office to the sheriff. There was never any accountability. He did agree it was a documented lie I had, and the book will go more into how I use the Freedom of Information Act to get these documents. Then I was lied to by the Sheriff's Department, and there was no accountability. Charlie Crist, 6 bodyguards came out, fairly big boys, got very close to me, told me to leave the lobby. And that was the only answer I ever got out of Charlie Crist. He promised that if the bill did make it to his desk, he would sign it. But after it was all watered down and no accountability, he signed nothing.
Yeah.
And it was years later we found out how the sheriffs were using the money.
For hand sanitizer. That's the $30,000 worth of hand sanitizer.
Well, we have a dirty organization of sheriffs in Florida, but they have clean hands.
Yes.
Okay, I want to tell you that. They got clean hands. What I did find out, and I did not know, when you start asking accountability from the sheriff's organization, the federal order police, the big guns on the block.
You become an enemy of the state.
And that was exactly what I became. Most wanted list #1. No communication. They did do nothing. I recently found out about a sheriff in our county, excuse me, and I had it confirmed by other people. I went around and checked. And some were the Wings of Faith Church. Other people I bumped into by accident. For some reason, we got on the subject. Well, the sheriff was actually released for stalking a lady, and they dismissed him. Well, today he's working over at Sebring High School.
Whoa. Now,
I hope this makes it on your air, because I took this to the second strongest man in Florida, Mark Perez at Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I took it to Angel Taylor, an Orlando agent. I took it to the Advocacy Center in my area. I took it to Governor Governor Scott today, secretary. I took it to the Attorney General's office. That was back in November of 9th. Nobody's ever contacted me yet. And this officer has a history of high violence, and he's over at the high school.
Wow.
You see, that's the good old, it's the good old boy network.
Right.
You know, they're even if Bubba's a screw up, they're gonna find Bubba a job.
They're gonna take care of him. Now, I know before that, well, not before, I know in the book you were saying that you guys were newcomers to Sebring when you came. You weren't raised there, you weren't in that inn. But before this incident, was that ever an issue? Like, how was your relationship in Sebring prior to this incident?
Well, prior to that, we're actually living the American dream. You know, I bought a piece of dirt, and I single-handedly, with the family's help, pretty well literally built my own house. Block, laid everything, electrical, and we seemed to be fitting in. Later on, we did find out that Carol is Italian, and a lot of Italian looked very Spanish and Cuban oriented, and there was some small talk. Since she was a Cuban, why is this boy with her, meaning me? So there was some, I'm not getting caught up in it. I'm just doing my own thing. So it did become an issue. Later on, many years later, somebody found out she was Italian, and it made all the difference. Oh, she's an Italian, she's not a Cuban.
Later, but before the incident?
No, this was many years after the incident.
Oh, okay.
You know, a lot of retaliation was on us. It just gave them a little bit more fuel to the fire.
Because they thought she was,
yeah,
okay.
There's a little racism going on there, you know.
Right.
What is our number one problem in Sebring. I've talked to anybody of culture, and it's still, nobody's butting back. One day there's going to be a very bad incident in Sebring.
Now, how big is Sebring?
Sebring right now is the winter months. We'll go about 100,000 to 110. Then we'll die down to about 75,000. Then 35,000 of that is pretty much the old time good old boys. You know, and they pretty well call all shots in the city. Everything's called. There's a lot of white supremacy act in Sebring. You have to be there. They control it, they run it. There's very few people of anything other than white in any type of high business area.
As I know, you start off your book with saying that the train tracks and I believe it's the railroad whistles are the signal for the African Americans to get home.
Yeah, actually the whistle is, which actually was why I started that way, is when I was talking to Lewis. You know, during this time we're running back and forth with Matthew out of the train or whatever places we're going, and the whistle blew. And it was just me and Lewis sitting there, and he's an old man, and with somewhat of a southern drawl, he says, you know what that whistle's for? And I said, no, it's an air whistle. It's piercing. And he says, well, the way it went back in the old days, and we're pointing to the tracks just a few feet away, he said, the tracks at 6:50 in the morning, the whistle blows. And the poor people on the east side of the tracks, of color, race, but poor, were allowed to line up on the tracks. Then the whistle blew again at 7. You were allowed to enter the city of Sebring. Okay? When the whistle blew again at noon, you were allowed to eat. When the whistle blew again at 5, your day at work was over.
So you have to.
But when the whistle blew at 9, and I'm being polite, because but I would have said it different without the microphone. Your butt don't belong on this side of the tracks, okay? At all. Later on, I'm on the outside of the tracks. I'm not with Lewis, okay?
Yeah.
And he got caught one night, and they beat him some, and they made him dance like a monkey and hang by a pickup truck, and it was the sheriff's department that did it to him. That's very belittling to any man or any human. And we talked about it, and I told him my story. And we stayed in touch till he died. A few years ago, he died. And the stories he would tell me of the suppression, what is still there. I can go back to the quarters And there's still people of color who still remember the old ways, the Ku Klux Klan, the way they walked, protested. They're scared. They know what I've done, and they're amazed I'm still here.
It sounds like it definitely could have gone another way. And now that you've added that extra layer about the racism that goes on there, do you think that besides just exposing the city for what they were doing, do you think that any of the backlash you got is because they thought you were married to a Hispanic lady?
I think some of it might have been, but it was ever so slight. What really got me in trouble was seeking the answer is how Matthew got beaten 3 times over 2 hours and 47 minutes to be exact. And what happened? And as I'm digging, it's a big embarrassment to the Utopia Sebring in Lake Placid area. This sort of thing doesn't happen. I had a southern expression was told to me by a sheriff one day, and it always stuck with me. One, justice goes to the highest bidder. The thing she described in Sebring was, it's like a white sheet and we got a little spot on it. Now we might have to clean it and clean it and clean it. But eventually, Bobbie, we're going to clean that little spot away. See, what happened to my son did not happen. What happened to Eric Doty did not happen. Sebring.
And that was going to be my next question. If I were to call them today, would they say Matthew?
Well, you know, as I say, I tell you, today they know who I am. Yes. I have to watch my P's and Q's. I turn my signals on. I park right. You know, as you've seen, that one law I was arrested on was 1920 law.
Yes.
I am the first man in 70,000 cow-out episodes
To
ever get arrested.
For jail time.
And I was looking at a year in prison on that. And as you know, you'll see I battled the Florida bar on that. And I had some dirty lawyers, Keogh and DeBose.
Yes, those were, if I remember correctly, weren't they the ones that were actually doing business with the school system on the side?
Yes.
And see, I'm paying attention.
Yeah.
Those were the ones that were doing business with the school system on the side, but they let you retain them, gave you the advice, and then said, oh, by the way, we can't represent you in Matthew's case because we do business with the school
Well,
system.
they work for high risk management. You're going to find out that they were in the same, you do a little more digging, they go back to like the Florida Gator alumni. Bill McCullen, a former. Bill did hold my documented lie in his hands, and he said, this is a documented lie, and he pointed straight to Charlie Crist's office. That's who you got to get to do something. And I talked to Dane Eagle, the #1 aide, and again, Charlie Crist can answer you in a circle. When you leave the room, you knew it no further than you did.
Well, that's called politics.
Yes, it's called politics, and I wanted to. The mess never did get cleared up. I did take it to Commissioner Bailey. He would never meet with me. He did give me his other men, LaFiles, LaPrez, and they pretty well told me to be quiet, and I felt I was threatened by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in the office. You know, they leaned on me. And,
Well, I think that hearing your story, one of the things that people will be interested in knowing is, how is Matthew today?
Okay, we're 10 years after it, almost 11 years. Matthew does have a chip on his shoulder of Sebring in Florida. He moved on to another state and he studied finances, and we all try to stay away from this situation. He went on his own way in life. Once in a while he drops a phone call. He's still bitter about it. We never got justice. I've been divorced, and my family fell apart, and I have to say I have to take a certain amount of responsibility for that, because I was hell-bent, heaven-bound for an answer. And I did give Matthew I told him I was going to get him an answer, and I did nothing. At the end, I wasted 4 years of my life on lobbying. I found out the bully bill was around for 33 years. Brings up the question, what took so long to get it by?
Yeah.
Charlie Crist knew about it since like 1988. He was a director of education. He was in education. He was an attorney general. He was a governor. Did nothing.
Well, I think that reading your book has definitely opened my eyes a lot to what can happen. And I really do think that it's a read that anybody that has an interest in the subject or believes that bullying is wrong should read. How can they find your book?
Well, the best way is anybody online has it, okay? And Amazon. And eventually I'm going to put back a website where you can order it. But at this time, Books A Million in Sebring will not carry my book. Okay, so in Sebring, you're not allowed to have Shattered Dreams, Broken Patriot. But Amazon is selling them. It does have a 5-star review at this time. It's early on in the reviews. And Amazon did give my book a 96% chance of making the market.
Well, that's good. So they can just go to Amazon.com and search for Shattered Dreams, Broken Patriot.
Yeah.
And so they can go to Amazon.com and purchase Shattered Dreams, Broken Patriot. It's definitely a recommended read. Now you have a Facebook. I saw that. Is it Shattered Dreams, Broken Patriot?
Yeah, I have that. You know, I have a Shattered Dream, you know, and I'm just kind of messing with it a little bit. I gotta say, I do miss old Carol because she was a whiz kid on that computer, and I'm the original caveman, okay? So you have to bear with me on that. But I had to put this book out to inform the parents of America what you do when you battle your local schools and your local government. We have a long way to go in this country, and this book will show you this. Long way. I mean, I don't mean to preach, but I put my faith in somebody with higher power. No, but long way when you read my book. But just to say what you said, I've never met anybody who's been able to read my book without putting it down, who wasn't disturbed.
Yeah, you have to. It's not a very long book, but you can't sit there and go from cover to cover. You have to put it down. You have to decompress. I've got notes all through this thing. I even, at the risk of sounding like a kid, I've even got a couple things highlighted in here that say with the WTH on them, like what the heck. So, because it was just so alarming to me that a city would behave this way. And I commend you and I applaud you for doing what you had to do to find your closure in this situation, or as close to closure as you could, because like you said, there's never been an apology. Clem got away with a 5-day suspension, and it was a misdemeanor.
Yeah, they dropped all the other charges down and made it a misdemeanor. It did come up later on as I finished writing the book, is why he wasn't charged with attempted murder.
Wasn't that because his dad was an undercover cop?
He had something to do with that field. I never could get it all the way, but I do know there was a strong rapport at the local gym in Robert, and there was a lot of steroid use. Just like there's, like going to our Goals gym in Sebring now, there's so much illegal drugs being done by the sheriff's organizations there. I reported that, the steroid use and that for the youth, and they just said goodbye. They don't want to hear any of this.
No, it doesn't sound like it.
It's just not Sebring. It is Lake Placid. It is Avon Park in our county. It's your southern states in the middle off the coastline of the east in Florida.
Okay.
You'll find that in that agricultural area, and that goes all the way up into Alabama. It goes up into Georgia. It goes up into the Carolinas. I've had reports all through this. If you get off into these good old boy networks, but the good old boys go all the way to Tallahassee and Washington. I did get a letter to David Axelrod, and he did say he got it, but that's as much as I ever heard. You know, and our administration's got enough worries instead of worrying about little Bobbie Bean and his children.
Well, little Bobbie Bean has done a lot of damage, that's for sure. I know you didn't get what you wanted, but you got something and people are paying attention. But I do thank you for coming to speak to us. I thank you for sharing your story with us. I thank you for taking the time, and we are going to conclude our interview. And again, I thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Again, this is Carolyn Strong with Bullies Stink. We've interviewed Bobbie Bean today, and I believe that concludes it. Until next time, keep courageously conversing. You can find us at www.bulliesstink.com. That's BULLIESSTINK.com. You can like us on Facebook at Join Bullies Stink. You can follow us on Twitter at Bullies, BULLIES_stink. You can also find us on Instagram at Join Bullies Stink, as well as YouTube at Join Bullies Stink. Or you can email me personally at Carolyn, that's CAROLYN, at bulliesstink.com.